Welcome to Clothing Culture. I'm Emily Lane.
I'm Bret Schnitker.
We speak with experts where we explore the global dynamics that shape trends in the fashion industry.
Brought to you by Stars Design Group, a global production and design house with over 30 years of industry experience.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Clothing Culture. Today, we're going to be talking about the volatility in the apparel industry and the power of consulting. So, Bret, welcome back.
Thank you. It'll be a short episode because we know there's no volatility in the garment industry.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. You know, we've in the last year have seen a lot of volatility. Is this new?
Yeah, I've heard lately a lot of people say, we live in the craziest time ever, and I suspect that's not necessarily true. I think the world's always been crazy from its inception. I think, technology and communication has really brought that crazy front and center for a lot of people. We see it and experience it in real time. I think that when situations in the world occur like that, humankind does kind of one or two things, right? We talk about, fight or flight, and I think they, part of it's kind of reaction and fear, or there's this intuition, adaptability, and creativity that comes out of, trying to find your way through a new solution. I'm excited about what we're going to be seeing from the evolution of these times. And I think that, in our business, I'm never bored by the constant challenge in the apparel business. And so I think, in a lot of times in the context of the episode that we're talking about today, there are a number of people, and me at times even, that have been faced with situations that you're kind of in the middle on. Like, I don't have the answers. I need some support and help. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in our industry. And for those times that we need reassurance to make a good decision, or we need more information to make a good decision, there are certainly opportunities for consultancy to help out.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. And you've commonly have talked about in the past having some skepticism around consulting. I'd love to learn a little bit about where that came from, and then how did that shift for you? Yeah,
I think a lot of people have skepticism in consulting. I mean, there's a lot of, hey, if you can't, do teach kind of theories. Right. And, when you bring in a consultant, they don't have all the burden of a good or bad decision because you kind of pay them, they give you your opinion, they walk away. And I think, that older age of consulting was riddled with challenges. And I certainly, early in my career, experienced some pretty crazy ones, actually. And I think that formed my opinion for a lot of years on consultancy. But I think, over the years, when I really came up against a wall, I internally, we talked as a team, we tried to find solutions, and every team has wonderful skill sets, things that you're really good at. And then there's always things that, in many cases, teams need some help on. And when we've brought in consultants in those cases, and I think consultants need to be well vetted, you always must have a combination of kind of internal wisdom and external wisdom and kind of vet them as they go along. But I think in the times that we've done those things right, then consultancy has been a benefit. I can also say that even with, our evolution and the knowledge that we've had, we've brought in some consultancies, and they're like,
right, even myself included, right?
Yes.
We've kind of met as a part of that process.
Absolutely. And I think, I had my baggage when we first started talking.
You were a skeptic.
I was. And I think, sometimes playing a little bit of a skeptic at the outset helps really vet the tenacity and the skill set of the possible consultant too,
sure.
Right? You didn't give up. You continued to find ways to engage the conversation, break down some of the walls of,
sure.
Concern I had, and bring value. And I think, a good consultant will show that they can bring value and they can they have the patience to overcome the objection or the concern, of the potential client.
Yeah. Having intuition on that side from a consultancy side is absolutely important. You have to really understand what are the dynamics that you're working with. How do you know when it's really time that you need more than the strengths of your internal team? It's time to engage outside help.
When your first senior executive lights himself on fire, then you probably have a clue that maybe things are going awry. No, I think that it happens at different stages for different people. I think people that are, we've talked about in previous episodes, that if you are constantly evolving, you're still making mistakes in the evolution, right? If you're reaching, you're always making mistakes. There's always risk in innovation. But I think along the way, if you're evolving, you can be a little bit more keenly aware to things that aren't really lining up the way that you would hope them to. And you can make small, minor changes with consultancies along that path. And then, of course, the worst scenario where, you're going along a path. We've done it this way forever. We're going to continue to do it this way. The world changes around you, and you wake up one day and the house is burning down. And, those consultancies can be very, very difficult. I think that in my experience in the past, when the house has been burning down in previous organizations where they did have that kind of mentality, the expectation for a consultant is in many times unrealistic. They're brought on for a certain period of time, generally a shorter period of time. And if the house is on fire, you might be putting out a few fires. You might be addressing how to avoid future fires in your house. But, it takes time to affect change, especially at a point where there's some damage going on.
Well, it takes time to devolve, and it will take time to evolve.
Yeah.
So, and I would like to talk about that for sure, but let's circle back to a couple previous statements where you talked about, making sure to vet a consultant. So, how do you go about, what are the considerations that you make when finding the right fit?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, looking at experience is one thing. A good consultant will have a very strong, experience sheet, right? I think too, what's important is that you vet them with previous clients and not always the pre-selected ones, but you really try to look through and get an extensive list and figure out and ask the consultant. Good consultants will be open with, hey, this one went right, this one didn't go so right. So you can kind of vet where the experience lies within the consultant's strengths and weaknesses, right?
Well, and I think you're seeing there too, if they give you the examples of when it didn't work right, you get to understand what were the dynamics that didn't marry well together.
Absolutely right. And then I think a lot of companies don't do this. They don't vet it with their team. They don't sit down, have conversations with the consultant, with the team that's existing. Many times when difficulty happens in an organization, it isn't that, hey, wholesale, the team is just bad, right? You don't wake up one day and you're just bad, everybody. You haven't gone from being geniuses to idiots. And so I think, we have to be cognizant that there's still value in a lot of the existing team. There might be some changes that need to happen for people that don't want to evolve. But when you start to vet that consultant through the team, you've got a lot of eyes looking at the consultant to sit down and have dialogue. And you're never going to get this 100% consistency, but you're certainly going to get some good feedback. So it gives you an opportunity on where and how to engage that possible consultant for your benefit.
I would think too, by engaging your team to be a part of it, you're going to get a better rate of adoption because they've been a part of the process as opposed to left on the outside. Now it's time to implement all these new ideas.
Yeah.
Well,
it's important because change is tough.
Right.
People hate to change. And consultants, especially when a house is burning down, they're burdened with creating, they're the change maker, the ones, hey, I have to bring you to reality on where these things are happening if they're good at what they do. And you're right, if a consultant's just kind of dropped in the middle of the mess and said, hey, go do your thing, there can be a lot more resistance and change can take longer.
Yeah, I would imagine too that it's also important in kind of building that team rapport with your consultant, really gauging, is this a fit from a personality standpoint?
Yeah, that's a tough one because sometimes, personality fits are important. I think most skilled consultants understand that. They wouldn't be, successful if they didn't. They understand they're stepping into difficult dynamics to begin with. So there has to be some interpersonal skills to begin with. I think that coming with the territory, delivering difficult news, personalities can receive that information in different ways. And so you've got to be prepared as a leader to know that I've engaged my team as best I can. I'm going to value my team's opinion, but that consultant may say things that might not be received super well by different people. You will always find in those dynamics that certain people are kind of like, man, I see the problem, I'm ready to address it, and I'm engaged and excited about what this person has to say. And then you will find the other half, the other side of the spectrum where they're like, look, it's their fault and I'm doing my job and, I don't want to hear that. And I think as a senior executive, the management of the consultancy relationship and the internal team is critical. And a lot of that occurs through a lot of communication up front.
Yeah, I'm also hearing that it's important to kind of respect the opinions of the consultants. Like you've hired them, now all of a sudden those opinions aren't agreeing with everybody. How do you as a leader determine what feels right for your organization versus, I've hired this consultant for a reason. I'm going to trust what they're telling me.
Yeah.
How do you balance that?
I try to think of it as a global respect kind of machine. I think that as long as you're kind of respecting the internal people's decisions and you're respecting the skill set of the consultant, I think marrying the two, working through those dynamics, having detailed conversations to vet things. I have seen organizations that wholesale just follow the consultant's decision because, look, I'm paying him, so we're going to do this. And they've gone down some pretty difficult routes because, consultants are human beings too. And they can make mistakes. And I think, a very good hat for a consultant to put on is, look, this is what my experience tells me to do. I'm providing the information, but ultimately it's up to senior management of the organization that you're consulting with to make those ultimate decisions.
Sure.
It should not be a situation that's kind of pushed down your throat. And I think that was evident when you started, discussing consultancy with us. And I think, initially it was probably a pretty solid wall. And I think you knew how to kind of dismantle brick at a time and develop a rapport and a relationship and had a few wins in there that started building trust. And I think, again, built into that dynamic with consultancy that makes that challenging is typically when you're hiring on a consultant, it's within a compressed timeline. So how do you build that? Some of those thoughts and expectations as you bring in a consultant is that depending on the severity of the problem, you need to be prepared about the length of that relationship because you need to do a lot of this soul searching and change, especially large change, takes time.
Right. I've noticed, in the industry right now, a common trend is this downsizing in reaction to the volatility, and so a lot of people are coming in and they're...
Reaction and overreaction, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, a lot of people are coming into positions where now they need to lean on maybe expertise that they don't have. They're having to wear more hats than usual.
Yeah.
How would you advise people in these positions that are, all of a sudden straddled with... I don't necessarily have time to engage outside help. I have all these jobs I need to do, but, I still need to keep things moving forward. Do you have any thoughts and advice on how to manage that situation?
That's a challenging position to be in. It's not an exact correlation to the Peter principle, but it's, you're taking on a lot. And so in taking on a lot and some of it not being your skill set, you open yourself up to some negative consequences because you've accepted that responsibility. I think, again, it comes to communication. As people downsize, I think it's very important that teams within organizations are very clear to communicate that this is within my skill set and I can do this well, and this is not within my skill set. And if you give me that responsibility, there could be some issues. And I think therein starts to develop an opportunity for an outside consultant to have individual conversations with, a downsized organization or, a management base that's been consolidated a little bit, and figure out strengths and weaknesses through the organization and make suggestions and recommendations on avoiding issues where you're giving that burden to people that may not be prepared for it.
In our industry, are there other areas where you see opportunity for organizations who are evolving that, where outside makes sense?
Oh my gosh. I think in our industry in general, let's look at trend and fashion, for instance. I think trend and fashion, within any brand, there's this blend between understanding what works for your clients and looking at historical information, turns, sell-offs, opportunities, percentage, growth opportunities to fill in. There's this numerical equation and having some consistency of your brand DNA. And there's also an opportunity to look at what's going on in the world around and then have these opportunities to stay fresh and current. And within, I think, our business specifically as it relates to fashion, having outside consultants or having outside designers given projects to be able to bring freshness into the organization would be a really good, place for designers. Yeah, a little invigoration, a little bit of, hey, let's think outside the box when it comes to that. I think, as we move into an online space, my God, that is evolving so incredibly rapidly. All of that technology. Right? So having people that are focused on the latest, newest technology is going to be super important. Things change overnight. We talked about the new iOS update and how it radically changed the ability to
retarget,
manage customer base. And there's a lot of concern about, what was a successful organized business managing it through these different channels. Now that new iOS came in, it's kind of like darkness. You don't have that information. And how are you going to pivot in a situation like that and remain, viable? And so outside consultants could be really important in that area.
So here we are, that this latest example is a really good one. We've seen clients that have had, overnight reduction in sales due to evolution in online technology. At what point, how are you, we've talked about how to find the right consultant, but we haven't really talked about how are you measuring the success of the advice that they provide? And so, obviously sales might be one measure of success, but do you have other thoughts on how you measure the impact of the information, especially given what you talked about, where not all changes can happen overnight?
Right. I think, there's a ton of examples that you point out that while a consultant is positioned there, the reality of change could be much further down the road than the time that you've got for that consultant. And so that to me is the most difficult dynamic of all, because you hire a consultant for a month or two, you realize that the fact that he may bring might not happen for a year or two. And so, I think that vetting it is an ongoing process of team meets consultant. And I think, walking through those different steps along the way, understanding and vetting the timing that the consultant's going to tell you that it's going to take, and then looking at industry statistics to figure out if that's kind of an accurate statement, for different steps along the way. I think even if you're doing radical shifts to, brand DNA and design and styling, look, the average delivery time from concept to delivery of product.
Sure.
In our industry, unless you're real fast turn, very fast fashion driven like that, is usually you're planning a year and a half, 2 years out. So, to see those changes happen and then see the customer adopt it and then making decisions on the positive parts of those changes, it can be 3 to 5 year process.
You really are
shift.
investing in the future.
You're investing in the future.
Yeah.
And so, that's why I think making sure that that consultant has had a lot of skill, a long track record of success, if the consultant has been around for a while, it's important to look at scenarios or case examples that he's worked at years ago, and then dialogue about the teams today of things that he might have implemented, years ago, and see, oh man, that change really helped us as an organization years down the road.
Yeah.
Not always looking at the last 6 months worth of consultancies is really going to give you a good answer.
So knowing that it's really the impact is often so far in the future, how do you know when it's not working and then, it's time to maybe cut the losses and not, maybe go a different direction?
Yeah, that's again a little bit challenging. I think that there's some simple red flags. Inconsistency of path and process is something that should send up a red flag. There's such a thing as pivoting when you have more information, which can happen. But a good consultant should come in and really try to get a very strong lay of the land from interviewing people, looking at numbers internally, looking at dynamics, doing a wholesale historical study first. We had a situation with a large client, it was about a year and a half ago, and they were going from $500 million and their investment group wanted to go to over $1 billion or $1.5 billion. And they came to us because they were like, well, where can we grow? Where is our opportunity? And they had a number of categories and a lot of detailed information. I don't think we realized how detailed. I think when we accepted the task, we were downloaded with, I think, 1.5 million lines of information.
Oh my goodness.
And so we had to distill all of that. But through that process, I think numbers tell these stories if you can understand how to distill them correctly. And there's some specific metrics to do that. A good consultant will be able to walk through those metrics, use as a basis for, hey, here's what's working, here's what's not. It is atypical of an organization that's struggling or stuck in a place that everything is wrong. Usually there are things that are going right and there are things that are going wrong. And a good consultant will recognize those two and kind of put, hey, here's the good, here's the bad, and here's the ugly column, right? And so being able to address all those things and using some statistics at the base to be able to support that, and then creating a streamlined plan to execute the next steps with clarity will help the good consultant. If those things aren't occurring, those would be red flags to me for sure. I can't tell you the number of times I have seen organizations that will hire on a new CEO or a new manager.
Oh, right.
And it is wholesale change at the beginning. They feel that it is, I have to make my mark on the organization. I'm going to just wholesale change everything.
Yeah,
and
slash the staff.
Yeah, it's like the
change our
happens
philosophy.
almost instantaneously. And whenever I see a situation like that, that tells me a lack of experience. It tells me that it's more of an ego stroke than anything, honestly, because a very good new CEO, a very good senior consultant is not going to make wholesale changes like that.
Yeah, you've
They're
got to take time.
going to take time to discover the details of the organization, to really drill down on numbers, to have a dialogue with a ton of people, and then start to make a plan, vet that plan with the team that's there, address any elephants in the room in terms of problems quickly and decisively with a team again, and be able to construct a roadmap going forward. And those that just go in and slash and burn, or consultants that walk in and just say, we're going to do this immediately and do it quickly. I think anything within organizations is incremental. Sometimes those increments can move at a faster pace or a slower pace, but you've got to realize that large organizations, even medium-sized organizations, change takes time, and to vet the change, vet the decisions. No one has a crystal ball, so there's going to be some well-based decisions, but it's going to take time to have that done, and you can't just go in and make wholesale changes.
Yeah, and it makes sense to do it incrementally too, because you can, again, kind of track the evolution of and the impact of those changes, as opposed to everything's changed. It's radically different.
And that goes to the timing that you talk about bringing in consultancies. I think the pressure on the revolutionary organizations that the house is burning down, they don't generally have time for incremental change. Therefore, it can become quite difficult to make those changes for both the consultant and the internal teams. It's much better to try to address little things as you go along, saying, hey, this particular thing isn't working exactly right. Let's go attack that with some outside advice.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, those are all really great thoughts. I have one final question for you. Especially knowing that you've been in the industry a long time, you've been, the person running the organizations and running a company for so many years now. Not to make you feel old.
I am.
No. But, you've made the transition into consulting. And so what has been your favorite part of being the person that is brought in to help?
I've spent years doing a lot of things wrong. I've learned the hard way, as most human beings do over these years. And I think that, at my stage in life, what's nice is that I hopefully, I sound like a dad now to a kid. Let me tell you what to do so you don't make those mistakes. But I think that brings me really great joy to be able to sit down and take my experience and be able to sit down and have just straightforward dialogues with people in hopes that we can guide them in the right direction. We can give them some advice on how to avoid the pitfalls, you know, and I think that's an exciting thing. And to see that, look, some of the ideas work and blossom and grow. Some of the ideas that you suggest are taken into heart, and some of them are, hey, well, think about that. It's not our job to really drive that change. It's our job as a consultant to suggest opportunities for change or suggest better ways to do things if we have an idea on that. And then it's up to the organization itself and the current leadership to make those adjustments.
That's all really great, Bret. Thank you so much for sharing. We do have some good resources on this topic on our website at Stars Design Group. You will find a blog that Bret recently published that really helps kind of spell out a lot of what we talked about today, but in further detail of how to go about finding the right consultant and vet it and so forth.
Some old history of bad consultancies.
That's true. Yeah. Some of those red flags that we talked about. And of course, if you have any questions on this topic, please, by all means, reach out. You can find us, again, on our website at Stars Design Group. You can find us on our social media, both at Stars Design Group and Clothing Coulture. And certainly make sure to subscribe to stay apprised of upcoming episodes of our podcast, Clothing Coulture. Thanks for joining us.